What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be another new 2022 album review, and I'm going to be diving in with you all on reviewing the latest studio album from the band Venom Prison, entitled Erebos. Now this is the band's fourth studio album in their discography. This is the first album to be released through Century Media Records. The other three albums were released to Prosthetic Records, follow-up to Primeval in 2020. As much as I did say that I am going to be discovering many more albums and different bands in terms of new releases with my musical journey across different genres, Venom Prison were a band that I was really familiar with, and it gained a lot of attachment and the optimism to discover this band for the first time. And I did my full listen and reaction of this album previously, so do check that video out if you haven't already. They are a Welsh-based death metal outfit whose front woman is from Russia. Her name is Larissa, and the rest of the band of Ash, Ben, Mike and Joe were all working together to follow up one of their last critically acclaimed records in their discography. And as my result of listening to this album more than twice and really been thinking about this album, diving into my words before starting recording this video, I will have to say that this album is a monster. This is an album that is close to 50 minutes. This album was really well worth of the anticipation for many, and I really have been incredibly surprised by how ballistic, adventurous, and incredibly unique this album really did deliver across the main attraction of this whole album. A lot of the lyrical contents onto Venom Prison's music, from what Larissa was writing about, involves a lot of the rape culture, mental health, religion, misogyny, and various socialized and political topics, and across different influences of bands into that vein, like Napalm Death being one of them, and as well as Carcass. And they do blend in multiplying sounds across the death metal sound, but they incorporate elements onto a bit of grindcore. And the way I think about the sound of this album, a lot of the instrumentation on many occasions do make me wonder and agree that they can be very technical at places, sometimes really melodic driven as well. And I find that Erebos is a record where they absolutely do work these things out in such a big, massive, progressive way that it gives me a lot of the admiration and the dedication for this band, because I really enjoy a lot of these types of sounds and differences into what any band could really do in metal and, well, any type of band really, to really make something as diverse and as separate to what they would usually do. And as with many Venom Prison fans, that some will say this is a bit of a difference in terms of tones and production, to continue their discography and comparing this album alongside the previous three that I've released before. The opening song of Born from Chaos really sets things incredibly well with these marching drums and hearing the beginning sounds of Larissa's screams and these beautiful yet big guitar distortions, and then it leads into Judges of the Underworld. Judges of the Underworld is just as ballistic and as really versatile as it really gets. There's a lot of memorable banging drums and various patterns. These vocals from Larissa were incredibly violent and as a big attention type of sound, because they really grab you by the throat as she absolutely means it. The riffs onto this track were destructive and as really strong, and including some of the other tracks, like the next track, Nemesis. This type of direction of a track adds things in a really big bite and hook. I find the chorus onto this track to be really memorable, repeating a lot of the stuff of this record, and Nemesis is one of those tracks where it's non-apologetic, it's really saying something in a very interesting way. These types of lyrics are incredibly relevant, and I find that there's so much brilliance into these complex and diverse skills onto the guitar patterns and the drums. And one of my big favorites on this album is on the next track of Comfort of Complicity, which really sets things in an intensifying way. It's so chaotic into many of these directions, but then when you listen deeper into the track, they really switch things further and further, and you hear some of the most beautiful twin guitar that it changes the mood and adrenaline into something completely different. These guitar solos, they were passionate and confident, and I absolutely adore this type of setting where they could just really start something and let that continue on for a bit and then changing things into something else. And one of the best examples of that is onto the track of Pain of Oasis, which is one of the highlights on this record. This is entirely separate to what you would usually hear in a Venom Prison song. This is balanced in a dynamic approach. It's got a lot of clean guitar sounds, and Larissa's clean vocals were beautiful on this track. And this does build in a lot of the darkness, mysterious, but something in a disturbing way, because it builds in a total different experience and emotion because of its power. And I really do think this is one of the best tracks that the band has ever written across this album's entire direction. Gorgon Sisters is another highlight for me. This just obliterates in a really non-stop, violent and disgusting way. It's bludgeoning in a lot of these amazing technicalities onto the drumming and guitars, and even on the sound of the band here. The musicianship was powerful, it's dominating, and huge. Wonderful chemistry. There's so much to deliver and to really pay attention by what's going on this particular record. And there's barely anything that I would really say that I would find something in a bit of an indifferent type of way, because I can't. The more I thought about this album, the more I was really thinking about how incredible this album was, and still is. After many more times of playing this album, it gets better and better, more replayable value, more attachments, and this is an incredibly unique and diverse record. The guitar playing from Ash and Ben, two separate masters on this sound of the band, their skills were just out of this world, and Joe's drumming, really clean, spot on, phenomenal skills. He's just one of the most creative ones as well. And Mike's bass lines and his tone was adding in so much more spice, and the tone was really exquisite. And it's not just about Larissa being the main attraction, but the rest of the whole fucking band needs to be talked about by how as effortless and as prolific and musical the rest of the band really are, because Venom Prison would not be Venom Prison without these guys, and as well as the two previous drummers of Joe and Jay. And you got to give the rest of the band a lot of the credit. Completely dynamic and really phenomenal. I find that some of the later tracks, like on Technologies of Death to Veil of Night, while delivering the mentality of the heaviness, these types of tracks are very separate from each other. They are separate in a way. They are adding some groovy riffs. Some parts can be pretty thrashy, but like I said, this is a really big album in these separate forms that you need to add in many different things to make an album this interesting and this as intelligent and a creative spark. This is a creative album, and before I sign my review off, I will have to say that the lyrics on this album, and from Venom Prison in general, these types of lyrics absolutely need to be talked about even further. And while Larissa, I would say, bravely writes these types of words into what these words are all about, I find these words to be really, really interesting and yet still relevant by the mentality of us and what's been going on, especially into many of these emotions and these addressing words and views. The words from Larissa onto this album needs to be talked about even further. Not that I'm an expert on talking about stuff like this, but we need many more voices, more addressings on these like this. And I give Larissa so much respect. And it's not just about a band being heavy, writing heavy lyrics just for the sake of the sound of an album and a band being heavy. Venom Prison is, to me, a really unique band for putting out something as separate to what you would usually listen to on any extremity side of metal. These types of sounds and words can be like what Napalm Death can really achieve, and that's one of the reasons why I love that band very much. Not just because of the heaviness and the mentality of the music, but with something different and separate to what I would usually think about, not only in this genre, but of metal in general. I really like that this is the type of direction that a huge, upcoming, prolific, attention-grown band like Venom Prison can do something like this, and they do deserve as much of the love for that, and as well as the acclaim for this album. And I will have to say that not only this is one of the most talked about albums for the first half of this year already for many fans and reviews alike, but this album is becoming one of my top favourite albums of 2022 so far. And there's no rhyme or reason that I would say you need to check this album out for yourselves. Go and support Venom Prison and discover these types of sounds and moves into the sound of metal in, I think, one of the best ways imaginable. That's personally all I would like to say about Erebos by Venom Prison. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. And whew, what a fucking album this one really is. I'm going to give Erebos by Venom Prison a 9 out of 10. These tracks, they follow each other incredibly consistently, and it's becoming even much more better as an album, and you need to hear Venom Prison with this new record for yourselves. And if you have heard of this album, let me know what you think of this record down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.